Okay, it's 12:20 and I see that the recording has started. So we'll go ahead and get going. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Assembly Budget Finance Committee of the Whole. It is June 18th, 2020, and we are noticed from 12:20 p.m. until 1:35 p.m. today. And we will go ahead and start with introductions. And Ms. Camacho, would you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Allard.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy. Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Peterson. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Zalatel. Go back. Mr. Peterson, are you here?
Present.
Okay. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Camacho, and thank you all for joining. A reminder to members of the public that, or an announcement that the agenda is posted on the committee web page. So if you go to muni.org, Assembly, and scroll down to the Budget and Finance Committee, you will see the agenda for today. A reminder to members, if to put yourself in the queue, go ahead and put yourself in the chat or text me at 907-351-7199 if you have any issues with the queue or the chat. Okay, so we have a number of items on the agenda today, about 7 under new business. We're going to start with some updates on the CARES Act funding, COVID-19 relief funding, and then move on to an update on the 2020 budget, and then the 2021 budget schedule, the MOA financial status, a report from the Budget Advisory Commission, an update on pay audits, and then we have 2 items under other business. One is an introduction of the update to the rental tax ordinance, and the second, discussion of appropriation for the court. Then we will, we've got some time for a discussion on legislative and budget priorities, and then audience participation. Do members have any comments on the agenda or any requests for changes? I don't see anybody in the chat, so we will go ahead and start with item 1 under new business, CARES Act / COVID-19 relief funding. And I believe we have someone from the administration who will go over any updates we've received per Treasury guidelines or any changes, including different tranches of funding that are available. So do we have someone from the administration who will go ahead and take this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Lance Wilbur, the Director of Office of Management and Budget. I will start. I want to let the Assembly know that the administration sent in our grant request to the state. The feedback we got from them is that we anticipate that we will receive those funds next week. So as we move through that process, we'll make sure that the Assembly is apprised of the progress of us receiving those funds. As you recall, it's a total of $156 million plus. The money will be coming to us in 3 different allocations. The first one's a little more than $116 million. So that is an update on that. The Office of Management Budget is keeping track of all of the CARES Act funds that are coming into the municipality, whether they be the state allocation or other FTA, the list of other sources of funds that either are direct to those departments or to the municipality. So we're starting to keep a running total of those. So in the event that we want to do some reporting back to the Assembly or even to the grantors about how much we've got, when we received it, and what it's going to be used for, as we make those decisions, we'll be able to provide that information. So I wanted to let the Assembly know that we should be receiving the state funds very soon. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. I want to note that we've been joined by Ms. Zeletel at 12:24 p.m. and also that Mr. Dunbar has a question.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance, Madam Chair. For Lance, I had heard recently from someone familiar with the $1 million program that we sent out, the grant program for small businesses that was administered or is being administered by Cook Inlet Lending Center, that we hadn't paid, basically, that Cook Inlet Lending Center had put the money out the door, but that we, the municipality, had not sort of appropriated that money to them. Is that the case? And if so, is that because we haven't received the CARES Act money? And is there any way we can sort of front load that? Because it sounds like it's a burden on them and their partners.
Receiving the CARES Act funding was not holding us up. I was not aware that they had not received those funds, so I will be looking into that for you. Thank you, Bar. I do not know the answer as to why there's a delay.
This is Alex Slivka. The answer is those checks were issued on Monday, and both Cook Inlet Lending and United Way, which is administering the rent support program, both have received the $1 million allocations.
Great. The conversation I had was on Tuesday. Perhaps they just hadn't realized it yet. Maybe this person hadn't maybe realized it yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. I'd also like to note that Ms. Kennedy is on as of 12:26. Any other questions from members on this item? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Thank you, Mr. Slivka. We will go ahead and move on to the next item, B, update on 2020 budget. And Mr. Wilbur, this one is yours.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I will report that we have closed 2019, and the ability to do that allows us to put together our first quarter report. I'm waiting for some information from those departments during the first quarter of 2019. We provide a report to the Assembly, and if they were over or under more than 5% of their spend based on where we are in the year, I'm waiting for some information from that. But in lieu of not having that report available to you, I kind of want to highlight where we were at first quarter. At the end of March, we were basically 25% through the year. And when we look at the total amount of budget spent and budget encumbered from all departments, we were at about 28%. And I'll highlight some of the, break that down a little bit. On the labor side, when we look at all departments just on the labor side, they are they're a little bit underspent. Again, we're 25% through the year at the end of March, and departments were at 24% spent. But when we look at their non-labor, that includes contracts or services, lease payments, contractual payments, and a variety of things. Those are our non-labor. We were at about 33% spent, but that includes encumbrances. The spent portion was roughly 16, but we've encumbered a lot of money in anticipating of payments during that period. So I don't see any surprises thus far. There's a couple that have caused my interest. The health department, surprisingly not, they're in their non-labor, they're running. They're about 84% spent, so we'll be following up with them. Likewise, the Assembly is 87% spent in their non-labor, but again, you spend all of your non-labor pretty much on the elections. So when you see that number, the number shouldn't surprise you because all of your non-labor is spent early in the year. And then the other ones that I'm looking at are real estate. We pay our lease payments early in the year, so real estate pays primarily all of their lease payments in the first quarter, so it looks like they're at about 80% of their non-labor spent. So for the remainder of the 3 quarters of the year, they'll spend to their budget. Fire department, I know that there's some interest. The fire department labor is pretty much right on track. They're slightly underspending, and the police department is right on track. They're at about 24.5% spent on their labor side. So things are looking good so far for police and fire, and that's encouraging. So The report that we will try to get to the assembly, I don't know if we're going to make it on the addendum for Tuesday night, will includes the quarterly for the utilities. I don't see any changes or surprises in the utilities to date. So I wanted to let you know verbally so far in the first quarter, we are looking pretty good. Obviously, April and May and June will have some different influences, primarily, I suspect, in the non-labor side of the house, but we will report to those to you on a monthly basis, and that's all I have for you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Do members have any questions on this portion of the agenda? I don't see anyone in the chat.
Okay, so as soon as I have this report available and complete, we'll get it out to the assembly members. Again, I don't know if I'll make through the addendum because I'm waiting for this information, but if I have it available beforehand, we'll make sure that you see it hopefully before July 14th in some manner.
Great, thank you, Mr. Wilbur.
On the
go ahead.
The impacts of COVID-19, obviously we are keeping track of the departments when they've spent monies or resources that are relevant or eligible for COVID-19. I think I've mentioned this in the past. If primarily all of the operations or activities inside the emergency operations center and the expenses that they make, those are going to be FEMA reimbursed primarily up to 75%. And so we're keeping track of those to make sure they're not consuming departments' operating budgets. We've had to make some adjustments to make sure that some of those expenses have been moved from their operating to either the COVID account or to the FEMA. So right now we're just making sure that we're able to track what's being spent on day-to-day operations and what's being spent on things relevant to the response to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilbur. We have two members in the queue. First, Mr. Constant, and then Ms. Zelatel.
Thank you, Lance. I've had a number of conversations with Jason and other members of the administration regarding COVID-related expenses. And as we move toward figuring out how we are going to prioritize funding from the CARES Act, one of the main pools of funding that I'm confident we are going to appropriate are municipal expenses related to this emergency. And you just stated you've been tracking the expenses, and I'm hopeful that at some time not too far in the future, your team can do kind of the impossible, and that's put on your big Swami hats and give us a projection of where you see these expenses going through 2020. So kind of what I would like to see ultimately is what we've spent and what we expect to spend for this entire year, kind of like a budget, so that we can separate out those funds from any appropriations we make to ensure that we hold the taxpayers harmless. Is that something you're working on?
It is, because it's going to impact how we end 2020, and it sort of blends into the item C and how we build 21. And you know, the impossible we do every day, but the miracles take a day or two. So I think we can make it happen.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else, Mr. Constant?
Nope,
Okay.
that's a whopper.
All right, thanks. Ms. Zelatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine's somewhat related to Mr. Constance, and is that, can we keep a report or a running total as we work through CARES Act funding as well? It feels a little diffuse right now. If we appropriate, at one meeting or another meeting, and maybe get some kind of regular reporting on that. Thanks.
Through the chair, Ms. Zelatel, I think that we can do that. I will coordinate with Jason. I don't know if you might have joined a little bit late, but we are at OMB keeping track of the sources coming in, and then as the resources get allocated out or spent, we have the ability to track that. So yes, and we're working very close with Alex and the controller and his team to make sure that we're capturing the expense side as those things come in. So I think we can provide you a simple report.
Thank you. And it would be great if that's something, that we can be sharing with the public so they know what we're doing as we're doing it. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Anything else, Ms. Zolotel?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Do members have any other questions about the impacts of COVID-19 on the budget? I don't see anyone else in the chat, so we will go ahead and move on to the next item, 2021 budget schedule, which is also Mr. Wilbur.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to divide this one up into a couple. One, I'll talk about the budget schedule for the capital improvement budget, the 2021 capital improvement budget and program. We have received a significant amount of responses from community councils as of June 15th. There were a couple that hadn't responded to them that we traditionally have. So I think that we gave them a couple extra days to reach out to them. Chelsea has been coordinating with the community councils to make sure that they submit their projects for consideration 21 budget. So you can go online to, I'll send Desiree the link. I don't remember it right at the moment, but you can go on that link and find out which community councils have submitted, what their priorities were, and which ones have not. I'll remind, we created a new tool for the community councils this year. Hopefully it's a little bit more user-friendly. We provided some training to them, those that needed it or requested it. So we are looking to receive all of those few community councils that were not able to submit on the 15th for one reason or another. We reached out to them and told them they had till, I believe, the end of yesterday or today. We're going to try and make sure that we capture as many as possible. At some point, we need to move forward. The departments, in the meantime, are working sort of concurrently in anticipation of the community council projects coming in so that they can submit their priorities to the administration, which are due the end of this month for the 2021 budget. That will be their initial preliminary list of capital projects to the administration at the end of this month. So the development of the CIP is well on its way, and as those projects come forward, we'll be putting that together. And then the next step will be OMB will be blending those department submissions and then share them with the administration. I think we'll probably be doing that later in August or early September. So that's what's going on the capital budget. Before I go to operating, I'll entertain some questions, if there are any.
I don't see anyone in the queue.
Okay. On the operating budget, the 2021 operating budget, I've prepared some draft guidance to the department heads that I've asked the administration to take a look at before we send it out to directors. That will talk about some of the anticipations that we look at in 2021. The two highlights in there right now are the anticipated completion of having MLMP not included in our 21 budget process as it is now. There will be a small portion of it for a Klutna utility as part of the sale agreement. And then the alcohol tax, and there's been a lot of discussion from the Assembly and recently from the Budget Advisory Commission about how those resources will be allocated and could affect some key departments, primarily health department, I think, and maybe some granting programs. So that is being formulated. But again, this will be a continuation budget into 21 where any contractual requirements for increases or for leases or contracts that we have will include those in our continuation budget, but it will be an opportunity for departments to submit any proposed changes they have. We're also going to ask them, while Treasury does an excellent job projecting our revenues into 21 and to 20, we ask departments to give us any changes in revenue projections that are particularly related to their department's fines or fees or schedules. Obviously, we've made some changes in that since we've approved the budget. So we'll be looking to see what their revenue projections will be in 2020. And, you know, typically the ones we get are from police, from transit, from development services, planning, the permit center. Those are the places we see most of the changes, if there are any, in those areas. So The budget submissions from departments on the 2021 budget are the third week of July. And obviously, if we have a department or two that's looking, they need an extra more time because they're working with a board or a commission and they need some guidance from them, we'll provide them some latitude, but we need to get that closed up. Again, our goal is to get the capital budget sort of wrapped up a little bit ahead of the operating budget. So we're not doing them entirely concurrently. So that's all I have on the 21 budget schedule, unless members have questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. The ground shook a bit during that last item, and I appreciate that you didn't miss a beat on your update. So
Again, that's how we roll.
Just going to the chat here, besides some comments on that earthquake, Mr. Gates did post a link to the Community Council survey results. And I don't see the entire link on here, but it is available from the Muni webpage. And actually, we've got 2 members now in the queue with questions. First, Ms. Quinn Davidson, and then Mr. Constant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, Lance, with all of the feedback that we've been receiving from the community about our budget, what conversations you all have had and what do you expect to put forth? I know it's a little early, but as a draft budget, and how does it reflect those comments we've been receiving or not?
Through the chair, Ms. Quinn Davidson, I really do think it's too early to tell. Our office has not had those extensive conversations yet with the administration about how the 21 budget would be could be formulated. We're kind of waiting to see, and that's part of the reasons why the guidance that I drafted, I want to make sure the administration is comfortable with that, and to make sure that we're giving them some direction, but also allowing them some opportunity to express what their needs are. I couldn't tell you right now how the 21 budget is going to incorporate or not some of the community conversations that are going on today. I think it's just too early in this point in June.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Quinn Davidson? Are you good?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. Yeah, Lance, I really appreciate your unshakability. You didn't miss a beat, as Ms. LaFrance said. Now, on to the matter of community council surveys and the CIP. So we're like 6 years or 7 years into this recessionary cycle in which primarily the capital budget from the state has evaporated, and the kind of historic method of taking these projects, wrapping them up, and finding a funding source has disappeared. And I would just like to let you know that in the last month, 3 weeks, most of my community councils expressed reservation about the purpose of even doing the CIP process, when still they list their projects. Other community council projects get shoved onto their list and prioritized for them somehow. This happened again. And they just wonder what it's all about and what it's worth. And I know I kind of harp on this a bit, but it might be wise for the department to come up with some kind of a updated guidance and a new way of thinking about community council CIP lists. You know, I have one council that has all $10 million or more projects on them, you know, and they didn't come up with these projects. Projects are just there. And so just some thought put into that whole process in this new paradigm we are in, that we've been in now for a number of years, would be very helpful.
Madam Chair, if I could respond.
Oh, sure.
So I think, Mr. Constant, there's always room for improvement, but the list out for those who are not as detailed, interested or up to date on what's going on the capital improvement. What we do is the list that we provide to community councils are the list of projects that are in the adopted CIB. So we create a capital improvement budget in 2020, and then it had a 2020 to 2025 capital improvement program. So most of the projects the community councils see in the following year, in 2021, are pulled from the approved capital improvement program of this year as the starting place. So that's primarily where all of those projects are coming from. So if there's, that's sort of the base, and if there's projects that get deleted or removed or changed in scope, really that's the opportunity to make those changes. But I think, Mr. Constant, I'd be glad to have a separate conversation with you if you have some other ideas. We certainly don't want the community councils to feel disenfranchised. It's an important part of the early development of our capital improvement program, because their input to what their desires are or needs from their council are, again, the starting point. We also look to see how departments' needs are, implementations of approved plans and documents and programs that the administration and the assembly have approved. We use the CIP to implement those. So
if I might, just to be specific though, like in the downtown community council, there are projects for Sullivan Arena. You know, it just doesn't make any sense to folks who are doing this. And
okay.
There's just, we got to come up with a better way to communicate, I think. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Thank you, Mr. Constant. We have Ms. Zalato in the chat, in the queue, and also Mr. Falvey has noted that it was a 4.3 earthquake, and I can't see the details, but I think it was about 5 miles southeast of Girdwood and 12.6 miles down. Ms. Zalato?
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. So this actually, it follows up both on Mr. Constant and Ms. Quinn Davidson's point. One, as to kind of public process, and two, as to kind of what community sentiment is right now. Our budget is being scrutinized. So if there are tools or informational links about kind of how our budget works, how to kind of drill down into it, because I know it's a very cumbersome thing, and having done this once now, 1.5 times, I guess, I have two first quarter budget revisions under my belt. It's a heck of a learning curve, and I want to make sure that we're providing as much transparency and information as possible to the public, so that and about the process, so that they understand kind of the steps we're going through, because it does feel, I think it probably feels rather opaque. So if there are ways I can help with that, if the resources already exist and just can help publicize those, please consider me a resource, and please share resources with me. Thank you.
I will do that, because we do have material, and we, yes, I will follow up with you, Ms. Salatel. Thank you for the offer. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Thank you, Ms. Zalato. I don't see any other members in the chat with questions. Anything else on the 2021 budget schedule?
He
No,
might have raised his hand, Ms. LaFrance. There's like a Pete Peterson with his hand up.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Constant. I cannot see that. So Mr. Peterson, if you will.
Let me try to unmute here.
Mr. Peterson? We heard you briefly when you said you were going to unmute, but we don't hear, or at least I don't hear you now.
Yeah, won't unmute.
Oh, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that, you know, and maybe someone already mentioned this, that when you have larger projects like that, then they usually do the project in phases. You know, we have one going on in our Mr. Dunbar in my district right now it's going to be starting phase 2. These construction companies can usually only do about X amount of work during a construction season, and so, you know, they set it up with phase 1, and they hopefully we'll be able to get that done in one season, and then you can put phase two, on the bonds for the next year or the year after. And so that's how you get some of those, larger projects done, and it might take 3 or 4 phases in the really larger ones. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any further comments from the administration on this item, or any other questions from anyone else?
Nothing from me, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Moving on then to item D, MOA financial status, Mr. Slivka.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, the municipality is in fine shape financially. I would note we're in the middle of June, and I realize that we did extend the payment dates for our real estate taxes, but I do know that some of the banks have already made their payments based on the old due dates. So we are doing fine from that standpoint. I would also like to give members a heads up that mostly every year we do a general obligation debt offering, and we are in the process of scheduling such a debt offering to go to market in August. Right now we're projecting roughly 52 million in GO debt for the municipality and 72 million in GO debt for the school district. And which should be enough money for them to complete their construction projects for the next, I think, year and a quarter is the timeline we're looking at. Other than that, I would turn it over to our treasurer, Mr. Dan Moore, to talk about the monthly revenue as well as some information on revenue impact estimates that we have for the COVID-19. Mr. Moore?
Okay, thanks, Alex. So, Madam Chair and committee, I'm going to just give you some really short highlights here on the revenue report. We're actually going to be presenting a lot of detail to the executive group. That's the mayor's top advisors later today at 3 p.m. And our plan to give a detailed written report to the assembly would be for the, I think it's the July 14th meeting. So anyway, we put a lot of work into this. This is our very first attempt at trying to formally come up with an estimate for where 2020 looks at this point. And the grand total projected negative revenue variance for general government as of this point in time is right around $16 million. That's 16 million. And to summarize, there's 5 main of the 5 largest negative revenue variances are the following, and I'm going to read them in order. Room tax is 8.5 million of negative revenue variance. That is just the general government portion. Rental vehicle tax is number 2. That's minus 5.1 million. Motor fuel tax is number 3. That's minus 1.6 million. Parks and rec fees is number 4. That's minus also 1.6 million. And then the fifth, in the top 5 is transit fees at minus 800,000. The grand total of those numbers is minus 17.6 million, but there is a notable offset on the positive side, which is the cash pool investment earnings so far this year and then projected for the remainder of the year is $1.5 million. So if you net those two numbers, the top 5 negative and then the one major positive, it's about $16 million overall negative variance. The top 2 that I listed, room tax and rental vehicle, are definitely visitor related. So because of COVID-19, obviously we're not getting the visitors that we normally would get. And those are 2 heavily impacted taxes because of that. The other 3, number 3, 4, and 5, motor fuel tax, parks and rec fees, and transit fees are very much tied to the hunker down order and people not having employment or being told to stay at home. And because of that, there's not the normal circulation of people on the roads or of people doing extracurricular activities. So that's just the high level summary. We do, like I said, we have a lot of detail that we're going to present to the exec group this afternoon, and then we'll be able to share that with you in writing at your next meeting in mid-July. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. We have a question from Mr. Constant and then from Ms. Kennedy.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The numbers you just read off, Mr. Moore, those were projections to the end of the year or year to date in terms of the shortfalls?
Projections to until the end of the year. We already know we have at least 4 or 5 months of actual data, and then we work with the departments, and we also use our own sources of information to give a best projection for the remainder of the year.
And so what would the level of confidence be in those projections? Pretty confident, kind of confident?
I think, March and April and May were very, very challenging. I think our projections are hoping that there is at least some semi return to normal activity, but we're not assuming full return for the remainder of the year. So we believe that in a number of cases, some of the hit that was taken in the early part of the year can be made up to at least a significant degree. Though the area that is most permanent and it just seems like the writing is definitely etched into the wall is with the visitor related taxes, room tax and rental vehicle, and those two alone are probably 80% of that net number. So it's fairly high confidence. I mean, everything can change. As we know, it's changing all the time. But I think we are. We're pretty confident in what these numbers are. We'll update them every single month, and usually we pick a range when we do estimates, and these would be reflective of the midpoint range. So they could be worse, but they also could be better.
So just one last quick follow-up then. So I am assuming that these losses, because they're budgeted revenues, are going to go into that spreadsheet of expenses related to COVID that we can offset with the CARES Act money. Is that a fair assumption?
I would defer to Alex or to Lance on that because I'm not sure exactly how that all is going to be handled.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Constant, we are going to follow the U.S. Treasury guidance in terms of how the CARES funding can be used, and it is very specific in what it can and can't be used for. I would say, I think we've said it a few times, one of the things it can be used for is for costs related to public safety and health. And so as you see us bring forward to you the requested sources and uses of CARES funds, you can certainly expect that we will be using the CARES funds to cover a good portion of our costs for public safety and public health.
I didn't answer the question, but that's okay. I can get more information offline. Thank you.
This is Jason Bockenstedt. I will try to answer the question for Assemblymember Constant. Is that yes, we believe that there is the flexibility within the CARES Act and the Treasury guidance to make sure that we do not have any losses at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. And Mr. Gates would like to weigh in on this. Mr. Gates?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I have read the U.S. Treasury's guidance on use of the CARES Act funding, and I think that it was pretty clear in their facts about it, that CARES Act funding can't be used to backfill lost tax revenues or decrease in tax revenues due to things like this. So, I mean, I won't say no because I understand there's also a CARES Act Part 3 legislation right now in Congress or something, and I might be a little bit behind on it. But I wouldn't promise or speculate that we could use the current CARES Act funding to backfill this tax revenue loss.
Through the chair, this is Alex Slivka. Mr. Gates speaks correctly. I will reiterate what the frequently asked questions of U.S. Treasury guidance does say. And it does say that it is a presumed allowable use for the CARES Act funding to be spent on public safety and public health. And so we are going to follow that guidance and use a portion of this CARES Act funding to pay for public safety and public health. And we believe that will be in compliance with the guidelines that are existent today, with the funding that we are going to receive now, and does not anticipate and or rely upon any additional funding, which is uncertain at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Slivka, and thank you, Mr. Gates. Was it all, Mr. Constant?
That's all I'm going to ask online. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have two other members in the queue. First, Ms. Kennedy, and then Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As long as you're doing projections in that, and this may be, just premature, but you're not really trying to do any kind of projections on potential loss of property tax. Is that correct? And then after that, I have another question, but I just kind of want to talk about what you're maybe foreseeing in the property tax revenues.
Through the chair, this is Alex Slivka. You're correct. We are not projecting any loss of payment on property taxes.
Thank you. And I guess one of the comments I would make before I ask my other question is that I am getting calls from people who are asking if there's going to be any kind of provision for incremental payment plans or any more extensions. People are telling me they want to pay their taxes, but they're really not sure that they can because they use so much of their funds just to keep the lights on and pay the rent. Typically, businesses don't necessarily keep an escrow of some sort that you would normally see in a mortgage. But anyway, if anybody really wants assistance in paying their tax or extending those payments, are you talking to people about that now? Are you trying to formulate some kind of a provision for that? Or what's been the approach to that right now?
Through the chair, Alex Slivka. Again, the CARES Act frequently asked questions guidance is really pretty clear that it can't be used for property tax relief. And, while we, of course, are very understanding of the impact being felt, we would point to the vast amounts of money that have been put forth both by the federal government and then also, as has been recently announced, through the state government. And so we would certainly direct any business owner who was in a bit of a bind that they should certainly seek those funds, because those funds can very clearly be used to pay business expenses such as property tax.
Well, and actually, Mr. Slivka, I guess that I don't want to muddy that too much, because we do know that some of our businesses, it's problematic for them to get some of this funding, and some of it's just slow in coming as well. So I kind of want to separate the idea out between what CARES funding might be doing versus what the municipality itself can do to be a little more flexible in helping people pay their taxes. So the question really does come down to what kind of consideration is the muni doing on its own to help accommodate for some of these people who already know that it's going to be difficult for them to pay their taxes in one fell swoop, and maybe are asking for some kind of extended payment plan.
This is Dan Moore. I can just say something additional to that. We also, for the July 14th assembly meeting, we have our standard resolution. We have to present this by state law that sets the due dates for business personal property. And so the question I heard was focused quite a bit on businesses and also about time frame and being able to be more flexible. the plan is, and the draft resolution we have right now extends out those payment due dates, not just by 1 month, but by 2 months for businesses. So normally they would be due, and they're due in 2 installments. So normally they'd be due in August and in October. We're going to extend it out all the way so that they're due at the very last couple months of the year. So they will get 2 additional months of time that they would not normally have to pay those taxes, and hopefully that will help.
Okay, great. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. We have Mr. Peterson in the queue and then Mr. Weddleton. And I know Mr. Peterson is having some technical issues. Are you on, Mr. Peterson?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I was wanting to ask Mr. Moore if the hunker down had any effect on marijuana taxes. Were they up or down, or just kind of where we projected where they were going to be? Thank you.
Okay, sure, Mr. Peterson. So we did look at marijuana. That's one of our taxes we always try to, keep on top of. And it turns out that marijuana is expected to meet budget and maybe even exceed budget. So we've looked at some studies, say for alcohol, because that's going to be another tax coming in 2021. And typically in rough times in the economy and the market, alcohol, and we're learning with marijuana, they actually don't go down that much. So the only caveat there is we expect, built into our projection, we actually expect to lose the visitor consumption of marijuana, but we see some evidence in the first 4 or 5 months of the year that it looks like we will at least meet the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. Getting back to the delay on property tax payments, I'd say one thing, the Paycheck Protection Program would not be able to be used for covering property taxes. It can be for payroll and also utilities and rent, but I didn't see anything about paying taxes with it. But as far as using CARES Act money to help with a payment plan for property tax, it would not be being used to cover property tax at all. It would be used to cover any cost to the municipality for, the delay of collecting property tax, which we know would be, we'd have to sell tax anticipation notes or dig into our other funds, and there would be a, opportunity cost of that, the interest rate or whatever. And that would be fairly small. I mean, that would be, $100,000 to $200,000 if we delayed till January amounts, we already missed the first payment, so just the second payment. And that would be a maximum amount, if, every commercial property owner did not pay their tax on time and delayed it for 6 months, which we know is not the case. So I think that should be pursued, just offering the opportunity for those who choose to do it to delay their payments. And the cost to the city is not a lot. It's less than we gave to taxi industry when we cut their fees in half and retroactively. So that is something that we should do, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow at our meeting. But I would hope you would anticipate that, Mr. Slivka. Thank you.
Through the chair, I guess I'll just offer what we have tried to say a number of times, that in addition to the issues relative to CARES funding, as Mr. Moore points out, people already have a payment plan where they get to pay their taxes in 2 installments, and we have already, through your good guidance, extended those by 1 month, which is about the length of time we could from a cash flow standpoint. And the further issue, which I think we've mentioned many a time, is that we are in the midst of upgrading a decades-old tax system, where once we set the payment dates and the due dates on the over 90,000 separate properties, to try and modify that is functionally impossible. And I guess I would just add the one comment that you mentioned there, that for accounting purposes, we could not extend funds into 2021 and count them toward 2020. That would present a real challenge. And then the final thing, of course, to remember is that there is a state code regarding equitable treatment between all property owners. And what you're starting to talk about is something where residential property owners are getting one level of treatment, and functionally business property owners would be getting a different level of treatment, and that may present some issues which I'm uncertain of, but which should be explored.
Thank you, Mr. Slivka. Any follow-up, Mr. Weddleton?
Well, we've had this discussion before. I have zero sympathy about your CAMA issue. When businesses had to close down, they certainly did not have any program to provide for that, but we did it. And they're hurting because of it. So we just have to figure it out. And that's what businesses did. They just figured it out. The split of 2 payments is, for some businesses, I don't think many, but enough, is simply not going to be enough. And we need to provide for that. And if it's through December 31, and that's the most we can do because of state law, then that's perhaps what we do. If we can go into next year, which I've seen tremendous creativity in how we use the CARES Fund. I've seen CARES Act money, super swift work that the administration has done to deal with this coronavirus. I think we have it within us to make this happen, to help people who are good, solid taxpayers, but this year is different, and we just need to accommodate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. And as you noted, we'll be taking up this discussion in future meetings. So we have Ms. Kennedy in the queue.
Thank you, Madam
Kennedy?
Chair. And I just want to echo exactly what Mr. Weddleton just got finished saying. But I do have one more question, and that's on the tax bills themselves. My understanding is the tax bills have gone out, that people do have that amount in front of them and they know what to pay. But were they actually given information about the extension of the deadline, or did they go out with the original tax due date? Thank you.
This is Dan Moore. The bills that were sent out have the revised due dates on all the payment coupons that come with the bill. So it was definitely well known if anyone received their bill as to when the due dates were.
Great, thank you. So we were obviously able to work on the system, the software to make that happen, correct? So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. We have about 20 minutes left, and I want to be sure to leave some time for audience participation. Seeing no one else in the chat, we will go ahead and move on to a report from the Budget Advisory Commission by the chair, Nolan Clauda. Nolan, are you still on? See. I don't see him. Okay. Nolan, we will come back to you. Let's go ahead for now and move on to an update on pay audits by Mr. Falsey.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. The pay audits seem to be proceeding well. I'll give you some statistics and chapter and verse. By way of reminder, we thought that this year it behooved us to better integrate the payroll department with the IT department for a variety of reasons. One was that we were working to better integrate some of the SAP services in-house rather than through continued use of contractors. And another was that so much of the work that payroll is doing relied on continued requests for change, RFCs, system configuration changes. And we really wanted to make sure that that bridge had been fully built. So we brought Philippe Bryce in from the IT department to help shepherd through the payroll department's work and to focus on these pay audits. And I'm happy to report, I think that has been a real success. And so we've actually doubled down on that. And we're continuing the efforts of trying to further system optimize the payroll department and are now having it temporarily report to Philippe Bryce and the IT world, because I think we have been very happy with the results that we have been seeing. So on the payroll audits themselves, the situation as of June 16th was we have completed the following audits. In the fire union, IAFF, we did the 9 that we promised to do. For the plumbers, we did the 12 that we promised to do. And then we've been working through all of the audits that were necessary to wrap up before MLMP was sold. So in the MLMP generation group, we have 48 finished. In the MLMP power management group, 5 finished. MLMP operations, 53. MLMP customer services, 20. MLMP engineering, 23. MLMP admin and finance, 13. MLMP non-reps and executives, 25. The audits that we are currently working on that I get from Philippe are the MOA, the IBEW active employees, of which there are 50. We have 18 of those done. There are some number that are in some review status. We have 22 that we haven't yet picked up out of that 50, but we are working towards the deadline of middle of July to have those finished, late July. Next in the queue are the withdrawn IBEW employees, people who have worked for us who are no longer active employees. There are 49 of those. We're hoping to have those done by the end of August. And then shortly thereafter, I think we're picking up the plumbers. There are 77 in the queue there that are part of a negotiated resolution that we're picking up. Like you said, this is quite a workload because it was our intention to say that we're eventually going to be picking up all the folks who have worked for us since we turned SAP on to make sure that the pay was done correctly. But we are happy that we're making the progress we are, and we are seeing that the pace seems to be picking up. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And if there are particularly detailed questions, I might have to phone a friend, get more specifics from Philippe or Susie Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Falsey. Do members have any questions? I'm not seeing anyone in the chat or any texts. So seeing no questions, thank you for that update, Mr. Falsey. We will go ahead and move on to the next item, other business, and we have 2 items here. The first one, introduction of update to rental tax ordinance.
This is Alex Slivka. I'm going to defer to Mr. Dan Moore to talk about that. I will highlight very briefly the second one, the appropriation for the port. This is merely a technical correction. When you approved the borrowing program, we neglected to include the word appropriate in that piece of legislation. So that's why we're coming back with this, where we are just asking for you to appropriate this money so that we can actually borrow it and spend it. So that's the very short discussion of that. And then I'll ask Mr. Moore to talk about the rental tax ordinance.
And actually, before we move on, we have Mr. Constant in the queue.
Thanks, Alex. Was there a specific item you were referring to on the port appropriation?
So on your agenda for the 23rd, there is an item where you are appropriating $100 million from a borrowing program. When you approved the borrowing program, we did not have the word appropriation in it.
I understand. Know the name or number of that ordinance? The item?
Yes, it is 14, item 14G AR 2020-188.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Moore, do you want to speak to the rental tax ordinance?
Okay, sure. Yeah, we Treasury had proposed an ordinance. It was introduced on June 2nd. The public hearing and approval is scheduled for June 23rd. The ordinance deals with rental vehicle tax. There's only 2 main changes. The first of them is just to bring it in line with what we've done with room tax, so that this sharing economy that exists can contribute to the taxation collection that should occur. And this was a result of the U.S. Supreme Court deciding in Wayfair that remote entities, even though they're remote, need to still contribute to the tax base of areas where they sell their products or services. And so in this case, it's the rental vehicle tax, and it would include businesses such as Turo, and there's a variety of others that like rent RVs. So that's the first main change in this ordinance. We also looked at our code for rental vehicle tax, and we saw that there was a cap, a dollar cap that's been in place since the very beginning. And I think this rental vehicle started around year 2000. We did research and we found that there's no other jurisdiction in Alaska or in the United States that has dollar caps in place like we do. And so it didn't make sense for us to, in our opinion, to continue to have that dollar cap in place. And by reducing or eliminating that dollar cap, it effectively helps to reduce property taxes, because rental vehicle tax is under the tax cap. So any additional dollars we get in from either ride sharing or from removal of the cap will help offset the need for property tax. The effective date of this ordinance that's proposed is September 1st. So it would be after any type of season we would have for this year. The companies would need some time to adjust their databases, to remove the cap. Those were existing rental agencies. And then for ride sharing remote type operators like Turo, they would need to newly create a platform that would then collect the tax, similar to what Airbnb or VRBO has already done in room tax.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Do members have any questions? I have a question. When you're referring to the dollar cap, how does that work exactly, or where is it in terms of, I'm assuming that's on the amount that can be collected. Is that per rental, or, I mean, how does it work?
Sure. It's for any rental contract. Right now in the current code, it says that for any rental contract on a passenger vehicle, there can be no more than $120 of rental vehicle tax collected. So there's a cap there. And then for a van, a truck, or an RV, the dollar cap on those is a maximum tax of $240 per rental contract.
Okay, thank you. And we have actually Mr. Gates in the queue, and then Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Gates?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I just recall that at some point someone mentioned that there might be amendments or an S version to the rental vehicle tax ordinance. Is that coming from the administration?
No, not from us.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Mr. Weddleton?
Oh, thanks. So I'm thinking, so the cap is $120. So at about $1,000 of rent, there would be no more tax. And I haven't rented a car for a long time, but it's probably, what is that, like 2 weeks worth? I'm just curious, this seems like we would be hearing something from some of the car rental places. I haven't gotten any emails, maybe others have, or I haven't gotten any calls. And I just wonder how many rentals are 2 weeks? I mean, has someone done the math on that, and have the rental companies been contacted about this?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Welton. Yeah, those are good questions. We did post to our website the ordinance. We also sent out direct communication to all registered rental vehicles operators within the last couple of weeks, and we also notified Turo and some of the others that would be new to the fold. In terms of the quantification of what this means, I haven't done the math, so I can't actually provide you those numbers here. I will say that there is a provision in code which exists now and we would continue to exist, that if the rental period is beyond 30 days, there is no tax. So so that will still exist. It's just for something that's within a 1 month rental period, if the tax happens to exceed $120, it will keep on, going to whatever it needs to be. We have an 8% tax here locally. And what this will do for the local operators is it's going to simplify their systems, because right now they have special rules programmed in their systems to administer this cap. The state of Alaska also has a rental vehicle tax. They have no cap. And so it'll make our rules and our system requirements in line with what they already have to do for the state. And it just simplifies their operation overall.
Okay, so it's 8%. So is it? I thought it was 12 for some reason. So that would make it $1,500. So that might be about three.
Tax. Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, have you heard feedback from car rental places?
We have not received any direct feedback. We did get a particular agency, can't remember the name of it, but they do plan on potentially testifying on Tuesday night, but we've heard no major feedback from the industry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Thank you, Mr. Moore. There are no other members in the chat. Anyone have any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to committee legislative, excuse me, and budget priorities. Item A, legislative, item B, budget. The role of this committee is a little bit different from other committees since primarily we focus on updates and information distribution. However, I wanted to open it up to committee members for any discussion on either of these two items in terms of legislative priorities, or probably first budget items for 2021, since the legislative schedule is a little bit farther pushed out than the budget schedule. So at this point, does anyone have anything they want to bring up for budget priorities for this committee? Okay, I don't see anyone in the chat, and I don't have any text. So I'm assuming that's a no. We'll come back to this at a later time then. We'll go ahead and move on to audience participation. And for any members of the public who wish to testify, you will have 3 minutes, and please state your name and I'll start the timer. You'll need to unmute yourself by pressing *6. And if you are a member of the public and you would like to participate, please do that now. I'm looking at the list of participants and I can't see full numbers. So please do speak up if you would like to participate. Hello, is there someone on?
I'm here. Ron Oliva,
would you identify? Yes, Mr. Oliva.
Yes, I always have good questions and hopefully relevant ones, but I know that the CARES money's coming and there's a consideration for the Golden Lion motel, but they did a $50,000 study, Agnew Beck, and it was supposed to go to the homeless committee with a recommendation to buy my property. Well, I signed a letter of intent, but Robin Ward has not returned any of my calls, nor I had a status report, but it had expired. And I'd like to know the status if the municipality is still interested in buying my property. I'd like to move forward with it. And then also, if you have CARES money, or get the shelter, who has $5 million and $40 million other dollars out there for homeless issues, to purchase my property and let me get on with my life. So I wanted to make that statement. If anyone has any information there, to update me, and I'll give you all my comments on a possible conditional use that is laughable to ever mention that in any other areas, because you have no control over the conditional uses that you've given out. And every time you give one out to a soup kitchen, to a homeless shelter, they always get expanded. They get suspended. They don't get enforced. So don't waste any time researching that. Just read the history books. They don't work. So staying focused, buy me out, get me out of here so I can stay alive. And hey, I'll be a much happier person and maybe more productive in the future, what life I have left. Are there any questions or any data you can give me? Everyone that agrees with me on everything I said, don't raise your hands. That's unanimous. I can see that over the phone.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you. I was just wondering if Ms. Ward is on the call, and if not, if Mr. Schutte is, and if someone could just give us an update. We've been hearing for quite a while that there's a study, but I don't know what the current status is.
Is there someone from the administration who could provide a status update?
Madam Chair, this is Lance. I cannot provide you a status update, but I will reach out to Mr. Schutte and to Ms. Ward and get find out what the status is of that study that I'm not aware of, and then find out about if there's any information about Mr. Oliva's property. I will get back with the chair.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Wilbur.
Yep.
And Madam
Thank you,
Chair,
Ms. Quinn
if you can budget
Davidson.
in the amount, if you can budget in that amount and get me out of this, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Oliva, and thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to testify? Let me remind you that you need to press *6 to unmute. It appears that everyone else is muted. I'll just give a moment here for any folks to unmute by pressing *6. Okay, I am not hearing anybody. You may text me at 907.
I do
I'm
have
sorry,
a question on.
I may ask who this is, please.
Yeah, John Finley.
Hello.
I was just going to say that without clarification from the administration as to what the use of the facility would be, it doesn't seem appropriate for the city to proceed with the purchase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunley. Was there someone else on there who wanted to testify as well?
Yes, my name is Susan Grobler, and I have a question about the intent to purchase the Golden Lion Hotel.
Okay, you have 3 minutes, Ms. Grobler. Or were you
Great,
just wanting
thank you.
to have
So
a? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
All right, go
I
ahead.
have some detailed questions I have some detailed questions to you guys. One, why was it just I just heard about this. I own a business on the block and my child attends daycare on this block. And I guess I'm wondering, one, how you plan to purchase it, and if you're planning to use the CARES Act money to purchase this this hotel, and if that under your assessment falls under the public health, that money is being used for public health. And two, what your intent is on how to make sure that the community around that is safe, and how you plan to support the businesses, including the child care facilities around that hotel if you purchase it.
Thank you, Ms. Grobler. Is there anyone from the administration who would like to respond?
This is Jason Bockenstedt. I will just briefly respond and say that yes, as many as a few articles have stated, we are actively looking at potentially acquiring a number of facilities. It was unfortunate that a lot of misinformation got out about that in terms of us, the administration, trying to sidestep a public process on that. That was never what we were intending to do. We are still working internally on the documents necessary to effectuate requests to the assembly like that. Once we do have those finalized, they will be put onto an assembly agenda, and there will be a necessary introduction and then set for a public hearing where there will likely be a number of work sessions and the ability for the public to comment on, and as well as the night of the assembly meeting, there will be public comment and debate by the assembly. So we are going to follow the normal public process that we have, and more information about this will be coming out in the next couple of days.
Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead, and thank you, Ms. Grobler, for your testimony. We are at the end of our notice time. I just want to note that Mr. Nolan, the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission, had a hard stop and had to drop, so we'll have to be sure to schedule him earlier in the meeting next time, should he have a conflict. Thank you all for participating and joining. This meeting is now adjourned.